My name's John Darlington. I'm the Director of Projects for World Monuments Fund in Britain, and it's my pleasure to kind of chair the conversation tonight. And the conversation is about, as Magnus says, if you looked at the screen, you'll have seen countless places which World Monuments Fund has been involved in, which are related to pilgrimage, either pilgrim routes or destinations or places of worship which people are visiting from far and abroad. So it seems right that we have this first conversation, so I don't think we've ever had it, about the heritage of pilgrimage. So that's going to sit at the core of the conversation tonight. And in order to have that conversation, I have three fabulous guests, and who I'm going to introduce you to now. So on my left, we've got Professor David Austin. And I wouldn't actually say it to his face, but David's an archaeologist. I would say that to his face, frankly. That's all right.
It's true.
That's true. It's true. I'm also an archaeologist, but David is also a bit of a hero of mine because he is one of the titans of landscape archaeology. So he's one of the people who really worked in this country to identify the fact that you don't just look at individual castles and manor houses and monasteries. You actually see the landscape as a whole. So that was in David's wheelhouse, and the connection between places is very much related back to pilgrimage as well. The other reason that David is such a great guest for tonight is that David has been working at a small but important Cistercian monastery. Actually, it's small but very, very big. I should qualify myself immediately before David leaps on. Yeah, I'm stop digging. So David has been working at Strata, Florida for decades, and Strata is a really important place of pilgrimage. It's a place where World Monuments Fund has been working for at least 5 years to support the Strata, Florida Trust in creating or breathing new life into this extraordinary place. So that's David. Next to David, you've already heard Dr. Guy Hayward, and Guy is, as Magnus has said, is the co-founder of the British Pilgrimage Trust, and the trust has a wonderful strapline which is to the effect that walking is for the body and pilgrimage is for the soul. So I really like this great strapline. And what I think Guy, amongst many other things, including his voice, brings to tonight's conversation is the fact that pilgrimage is not just about a spiritual journey. Pilgrimage is something which brings benefits in various different ways, benefits to health and well-being, benefits in terms of connecting people to nature, and benefits in terms of building and retaining communities. So hopefully we'll hear some of that during the conversation. And then last, but by no means least, we've got the Reverend Kate Bottley. Kate is she describes herself as a supply vicar at the moment. I'm sure we'll hear more of that as well. But she lives and works in North Nottinghamshire, and obviously is a vicar in that area. But she's also very well known for her work in media, for her writing, her work in television. And what I was very struck when I talked to Kate earlier on during our sort of pre-conversation, when Kate was saying, the thing which interests me, I'm more about This Morning Britain and Bella magazine than I am about the Daily Telegraph and Radio 4. So I think we'll get a nice variety in this conversation.
There's a political balance there.
I'm very sorry about that. One final thing before we start, and that is we're in St George's, Bloomsbury, and Magnus has already mentioned that maybe this is a place of pilgrimage for people from World Monuments Fund because of our work here. It's definitely a place of pilgrimage for architectural historians because this is a Nicholas Hawksmoor church, so fabulously restored, but one of his most eccentric churches. And just have a look, if you haven't, at the spire with its lions and unicorns around it. So have a look at that before you leave. But it's also a church named after our patron saint, St George. So I thought I'd ask Guy again to say a very little bit about what St George got to do with here and with pilgrimage.
Well, St George is connected to the dragon. Whether or not he's killing the dragon is another issue, but the dragon is a sort of energy of the earth. It's the wild, untamable force of nature coming through. And in the coronation, the invitation that the King gave to all the guests at Westminster Abbey last year, on 6th of May, which was actually a very important day for George and the Green Man across the world. And at the bottom of the invitation was the Green Man. And the Green Man is basically the life force in nature. So I thought it would just be good to talk about, bring St. George into the room a bit, because I think this reconnection with nature is something that we all have to go through. We are nature and nature is us. And I think pilgrimage is one of the things it does, is connect us with that which is present of life on this planet, and I think that's why I wanted to bring it in.
Good, thank you, Guy. And now a broader question to you all, and that is one which I just want you to tell perhaps each of you a story about what pilgrimage means to each of you. So something which allows the audience to get to know you a little bit better. And I'm going to start with Kate at the end.
I'm a reluctant pilgrim. I hate walking. That's what I have to tell you. It's not my bag. It's not my thing. Unless there's a tea shop or a pub halfway around, then that's not really my thing. I'm an accidental pilgrim, is what I am really. So I found myself on several pilgrimages that I didn't really mean to go on. It's a bit like with Nell and I when they find themselves on holiday by accident. I found myself on pilgrimage by accident. So I've been to Jerusalem, I've done Lourdes, and I did the Camino de Santiago. I'm actually really superficial. I did them all for telly. I did them all to pay a mortgage. But despite that, the wonderful thing about pilgrimage is your intention does not always have to be pure in order to have some sort of experience on it. And so that's my pilgrimage story.
Thank you, Kate. Guy?
How did I come to pilgrimage?
Yeah, thanks.
I was stuck behind a laptop for years, working on a PhD, and I was getting quite lonely and perhaps maybe hitting a bit of a crisis, and I felt I wanted to get back in touch with the babbling brooks, the cooking by the campfire, the singing to people along the way, taking songs into nature, and foraging for food. I wanted to feel like a kind of primal animal again, I think, on some level. I just got so heady with this PhD, and I think once I did that, I suddenly felt like I belonged in the land again. And belonging, I think, is what I got from it. And then I just wanted to go deeper and deeper into Britain and its land, and basically become indigenous British, and start to feel like I really am of this land. I think that's been my journey.
Yours is so much more wholesome than mine.
I know, well, it's not a competition. It's just my truth. And I think it's great to hear your honesty too. So, because there are so many pilgrims, there are so many different types of pilgrim.
Yeah,
So far we've had accidental pilgrim, we've had primal animal. David?
I'm going to go back to accidental, actually. I didn't tell you this, but because I'm working with sisters in the great founding, we went to Cito, High Mass at Cito, which was a joy in its own right. Then we went down to France, and I had a lecture to give in Santiago de Compostela, and we travelled across southern France, across northern Spain, visiting wonderful Romanesque churches. And every now and again I would see this sign, Camino Real, and I sort of knew what it was. But I ended up in Santiago, and we went to Mass in Santiago, the great pilgrim Mass, and by pure chance, we had gone on the pilgrimage. Pilgrimage finds you. You don't necessarily find it.
Fantastic. So 2 accidental pilgrims. I like that. Okay, so my next question is back to the kind of core of the subject that we're discussing, and that is how the past shapes pilgrimage today, and why is it important and relevant. So perhaps, David, you can pick that one up again. Why is the past important to pilgrimage?
Well, for me, I look at long-term history as an archaeologist. Although I am known as a medievalist, as you very kindly said, at the bottom of all my trenches, there is always a deeper past. There's a kind of muttered curse when you start to find prehistory at the bottom of medieval trench. But what it does tell us is that these kind of sites, like the one I'm excavating at Strata, Florida, in West Wales, have deep, ancient pasts, and they have deeper and more ancient pasts than even the architectures or the history books can tell you. At Strata, Florida, that deep past of the site, of the place, as a meaningful place to go, goes back 4,000 years. And we can tell stories, we can relate in archaeological and historical terms many sites, and these are textured and layered. They are laid one on top of the other, and the repeated acts of people in these locations, whether by ritual or by pilgrimage visits, actually lay down the meanings of these places that are then captured in the physical remains that we see, the architectures.
Okay, so in many ways the past is not a foreign country, it leads to the present case.
I'm thinking about when I was in Jerusalem, and there's on the Way of Sorrows, it's the wear of the stones that you walk up, and you have this kind of acknowledgement that you are literally walking in the steps of other people that have taken these journeys. And then you look at the crosses that are carved on the door of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You've got that legacy. You've got a very visual representation. Of course, for me, coming from a spiritual perspective, coming from a faith perspective, it's the stories of the people. Yeah, those physical representations are a brilliant sort of catalyst for the conversation, but I remember very vividly chatting to a man on the Camino de Santiago who he was walking in these amazing walking boots that were battered and torn. Now, a lot of people, you should really do pilgrimages in old boots, because those are the ones that won't give you blisters, but his were particularly worn. And so I fell into conversation with him, and I asked, we were talking about kit. As you do as pilgrims, you start talking about how heavy is your bag, because it's a very visceral experience. I think lots of people who have not done those kind of pilgrimages think it's very lofty and religious, but actually when you're sawing your toothbrush in half, because you can't cope with the extra 20 grams that brings to your rucksack, it's a totally different experience. So I'm talking to him about his boots, and he said, well, these are my dad's boots. So the natural question was, tell me about your dad. And his dad had died during the Camino a few years ago, while he was walking. And these were the boots that he had on his feet when he died. And he had decided to finish the journey in his father's boots. And for me, when we talk about the legacy of pilgrimage, what goes behind us and is with us and before us as pilgrims, here was a very, very, very visual display of the sense of we walk in the footsteps of others, and others will follow in those footsteps. So, the sort of ancient objects that are left behind, the beautiful churches, but we are part of that ongoing story.
That tradition, wonderful. Guy?
For me, it's about connecting with our ancestors and remembering from where we come, and so all through, even if you're international as a pilgrim, your ancestors are so connected to us once you go back far enough. They are, without them, we would not be here, and so I think there's a part of that that's important. I think in Buddhist mantras, if you go east, the mantras, the reason they sing them is because it's the same mantra that's been sung for hundreds or thousands of years. And everyone who's achieved some greater love or compassion, or that, they're sort of tuning in to that sort of field of the mantra. And I think there's something that happens similar with the path. That as people walk a path, all the hopes, the fears, the aspirations, all of these kind of life-changing transitional moments that people have dealt with, you're tuning into that frequency of getting it sorted, I think. And then when you get to particular monuments, I think all of those fears, aspirations and things, they come to a head really, and then that's the moment often people kneel in front of the altar and say, I don't know what's next, but please let me know, or that sort of thing. And I think it's that no matter what you believe, I think we all come to moments in our life where we maybe don't know what's coming next unless we're some kind of total genius. And I think it's in those moments you're tuning in to everyone who's done that before. And for the solace of the fact that so many people have done it before you is part of the experience rather than just you on your own.
Yeah, so the well-travelled path which people, as you say,
and that it's all sorts of people on that path. You
Yeah.
know, I think,
Yeah.
you know, when we think about something like the Canterbury Tales, for example, that's the whole point of the stories, isn't it? Is that it's different people on different journeys of different classes and from different backgrounds. And, you know, pilgrimage for me is never about the footsteps, it's never about the buildings, it's always about the people you fall into conversation with. And they create your pilgrimage, which is wonderful because that means that it's different every time someone does it. Even though this is an ancient footpath and an ancient way, it's never the same twice, which is what makes it really exciting.
When you say never about the buildings,
Okay, sometimes about the buildings. Maybe.
but honestly,
Say never.
never.
I don't know, maybe.
Because buildings, they do strange things to you.
Tell me about your strange experience with buildings.
I just think some people, even people who very clearly they have an atheist outlook or materialist mindset of there is no consciousness in everything, God doesn't exist. Even people like that, when they come to places like churches, or if they're designed, maybe the sacred geometry gives them peace. There's something about the place. No matter however you want to explain it, it makes people feel calm,
Actually,
more ready to meet life's challenges. And I think that is ancient monuments are built to do that.
I got locked in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which was, I want to correct myself here. So before we started, there were some pictures up and you saw the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now that's an amazing church because there's so many arguments and different people. I don't know if you know, but a Muslim person has to hold the key because the Christians can't agree on who should have the key to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There's a ladder outside that causes an argument when anyone tries to move it. So they've replaced the ladder. Someone put it up one day when they were fixing it, and it's been there for 300 years now because no one can agree whose ladder it is. You know, it's one of those kind of places. And I found myself locked in the Holy of Holies where Jesus' body was laid, where his tomb was, allegedly. And I'm not very good at sitting still and being quiet. And so I was forced to do it by a Greek priest who locked me in because he could see it in my eyes that I wasn't going to connect with anything. And it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. And I think that there's something about feeling in physical spaces that you're touching on there that's really important.
Yeah, I think we'll come to this as well a bit later about how we tend to look at things through 21st century goggles, so we look at things with a very modern perspective, yet actually how can we experience things in the medieval world? So we'll come to that in a minute.
But I think architectures, John, these architectures, and I suppose because I'm an archaeologist, I have this material sense of the world. These architectures are about arrival. They are one of the most extraordinary things about these places, and I remember about Santiago, where you have an outer door, and then there's an inner door. The early door is behind that facade, the Baroque facade. And it's about portals and the arrival, and as you said, Guy, perfectly, it's about that sense of when you arrive, you know not where you're going. And it's about the confrontation with death. It's about the confrontation with the metaphysical. And it's there in the stone, and it's there in art, it's there in the iconography. So in a sense, it is both completion and failure. So it is absolutely extraordinary when you're trying to conserve these places, as you do, John, as I'm trying to do in our own way. We have to pay respect to all of that, because that is all layered and deep within the memory of the people. Okay? That you are talking about. Memory is absolutely fundamental to the concept of pilgrimage.
Okay, so just take that theme on a little bit. We talked about some of the, you've all referenced actually the blockbuster sites of pilgrimage. So we know what those are. We know that they are, Santiago's come up several times. We know the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Mecca, we know these places. But David, I want to kind of turn back to you a little bit and to think about that underneath those monumental places, the ones which everyone knows, there are countless webs of networks of pilgrim routes historically, and probably, and almost certainly, to the present day. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
It's a complex subject, John. I touched upon it in talking about the stratigraphy of Strata. But what as a landscape person, thinking about landscape, as Guy has been talking about, the business of the materiality of pilgrimage, the encounter with pilgrimage, is actually complex because sites like Strata, Florida, were actually suppressed as pilgrimage locations. And there is an issue of power in the story, the long story of pilgrimage. And the site was the site of the shrine, Holy Well Shrine, which the Cistercians, when they first arrived, carefully encased. And then it got suppressed and buried. And only in the oral tradition, in the memory of the communities thereabout, is there this memory, this idea that Strata, Florida is and was a pilgrim location. And as we dig the site, we are getting slowly but surely confirmation of that. And then on the routeways, locked into place names, locked into little conjunctions, fragments of buildings, a hospice, for example, on the coast road to St. David's, on the pilgrimage route to St. David's, Strata, Florida built a hospice and it became a shed in the 19th century, and in the early 20th century it was swept away. So memory, I think, is this web of memory, these interesting locations. Many of those place names are about a cross long gone, which is at a junction, or a ford, or a bridge, and these markings are really quite extraordinary. And the one other thing of Strata, Florida, I just mentioned to you, is that when we dug the gatehouse, we were on the top of the rubble, and just under the turf there was a stone, and on the stone there was carved, incised, a cross, and it was part of the arch reveal of the great gate of Strata, Florida, and it was the consecration cross of the abbey, so that when the abbey was consecrated, the community did a circuit and marked these locations on the architecture. That wasn't the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that somebody had taken that stone and very carefully placed it in the ground on the top of the pit, chopped stones underneath it, and I'm pretty sure that what was happening was that as that abbey was suppressed in 1539 during the Protestant period, I don't want to mention the name of Henry VIII, he's not one of my heroes, but the abbey was a centre of recusancy. And recusancy is about the memory of the old faith and the reasons for going there. So at the gate, I always like to imagine there was this piece of turf that the recusants be able, like an envelope, be able to open up and say, this is sanctified ground. It might be a farm now, but it was sanctified ground. And all of that tracery of memory and oral tradition, I think, is fundamental to finding these thousands of places that litter the earth, that for one reason or another have been deliberately suppressed or have lost themselves.
So we really are, we're looking at this palimpsest landscape of kind of hidden, covered over and revealed pilgrim routes or routes of religious visitation, which must pervade every corner of certainly the UK and elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay, a couple of themes have emerged already this evening, and one of the themes has been about the crescendo of the journey and then the release in the building of all that emotion. So I just want to just concentrate a little bit about the journey and the destination. And what I wanted to ask Kate, you first, was you've been on several pilgrimages, as you said at the very beginning. What were the things that mattered to you on that journey? What were the kind of important moments of revelation? I know there's one particularly good one.
You might have to remember.
So your particularly good one is, I think, something to do with the fact that you lost your faith.
Oh yeah, I did. I remember that. So the important moments for me on pilgrimage are always connection with people, I think. But I encountered all sorts of people. Walking over the Pyrenees, I met all sorts of souls. And lots of people who said, I was having a really tough time with the walk, I was having a really tough time with the people that I was with, I was not finding the journey easy. Now I know you're not supposed to find pilgrimage easy, I know that it's supposed to be tough. And there was a lovely Irish Catholic lady who kept telling me to offer it up to our Lord. The trouble was I didn't think the Lord wanted it, to be honest with you. I wasn't sure that Jesus actually wanted anything to do with my suffering, because it was so pronounced. I stopped believing in God for the first time since I was about 13. I came to faith at 13, 14 years old, and I've always believed in God since then. But on pilgrimage, I lost my faith for about 3 or 4 days. And it was the best thing that happened to me in ages. It was amazing. It was such a refreshing place to be. It suddenly felt like a release, like a joy to be walking. And once I'd let go of my faith for a few days, it was only then when I came back to it that I had a new appreciation for it. And so pilgrimage caused me to lose my faith. So you have to be very careful with pilgrimage, is my lesson in that one. It's not for the faint-hearted. And similarly, other people I know that had no faith at all found just the edges of a faith on pilgrimage. So I always think pilgrimage should come with some sort of health warning, like a packet of cigarettes at the bottom. It can seriously damage your health and your faith.
And I think you were brought back to the faith.
Yeah, so I was brought back to the faith by someone called Ed Byrne, who's a stand-up comedian, who at the time was the honorary head of the Humanist Society. So I was brought back to faith by an atheist. Which was, the first time I found my faith was with another Christian who did the kind of traditional evangelical pray the prayer thing. Lost my faith on the Camino, and then Ed Byrne, I was crying in a heap, which is a very frequent thing if you go on pilgrimage. You find yourself sobbing at various points. And he sort of walked past me and put headphones on my head with some music on. I can't tell you to this day what that piece of music was, but whatever it was, managed to connect me with the thing that's bigger than us that I call God. So there was a real honesty in coming back to my faith through an atheist.
Love it. And I'm going to continue the theme of the journey as well as well as the destination. So Guy, when we spoke, one of the things that you talked about was the fact that, and you've already alluded to it, is that pilgrimage takes you to places like this, to physical buildings. It takes you into towns and villages, but also it takes you through countryside, and you have this rhythm of being closer to nature and then closer to man-made structures. And you think that's very important to pilgrimage. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I do actually lead guided pilgrimages in London, where we just do it in London, and then I also lead them in countryside. And so I've got a kind of experiential difference of seeing how people react to these two different things. And in London, it's like getting hit after hit after hit of a place like this, and every few hundred metres there's another, from Tower of London to Westminster Abbey. It's just these extraordinary sacred monuments, and people feel stuff. There's the silence, there's the peace, and over time they just get more and more charged up, and it's quite electric. Whereas in the countryside, you have much more of a chance to just sort of breathe, and the pace of the foot, the step after step, and you have more time between these amazing places to just experience the flow and a bird might come in front of you, or you might notice a plant to the one side, and maybe you stop for those, but otherwise you're just walking, you're getting to the rhythm. And there's something about being able to just walk, especially if you're next to people. You're not looking at them in the eye, and something happens when you walk side by side with someone. You're not looking them in the eye, and you're your legs start to sort of synchronize in this walking pattern, and that makes you feel one with them, and somehow you drop gently into this deeper form of conversation where people start to heal each other from, I can't say it in any other way really, because often when I do these pilgrimages I'm guiding, I think it matters whether I know all the history, whether I know all this, and I get them to do this, and I do the right thing, and I make sure they have enough time, all this sort of stuff. But actually, at the end of the day, often it's a passing comment that someone's made, that they've just been walking alongside, nothing to do with me, that actually it's the thing that they will take home and really made the difference. But it's about creating, I think, that space for change to happen within, however you want to, whatever level that change happens on. It could be a reconnection with your body, it could be a reconnection with nature, the companions you walk with, it could be the local community, feeling like you're actually part of this land and the different communities and strangers you meet, or the stars, or animals, or the plant kingdom. You know, there are different levels of connection you can go on, and I think the more variety you have in all of the different facets of what it is to be human on this earth, you're going to have a richer experience. And so the longer, I guess, if you walk Camino, over time you're going to be meeting all these different dimensions of experience. And we have created a one-day route, a network of one-day routes to all the cathedrals in England and Wales. So you walk you go outside the city, and then you walk in maybe 7 miles away, and then you walk into the cathedral city, and it's that transition between countryside and city that's really interesting, because you really see how humanity shapes land for itself as you go into cities. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, London is more biodiverse than the countryside, most of the English countryside. Because everyone has different gardens, they all have different plants, and so there's huge biodiversity in London. So it's not that London is not a green space, but there is just something about the rhythm of the way things come into your vision and stuff that changes, and obviously the air quality is maybe a bit better too.
Okay, so the variety of experiences is really important.
But it's also about legacy. You know, we were talking a few moments there about legacy. It's allowing the pilgrimage to do what the pilgrimage has always done. You know, so you're not just following in the literal footsteps of the people, you're also following in the experience footsteps as well. So if you just allow the pilgrimage to do its thing and to give it space to work its magic, it seems to me that it always does, despite the people that are on it.
Actually, to add to that, one of our patrons of the British Pilgrimage Trust, Emma Bridgewater, who will be known to many of you, and is a great lover of heritage, she once said to me, she said, I'm not convinced it's that the destinations are where the big breakthroughs happen. She said, sometimes she walked for 4 weeks from Winchester from Southampton to Canterbury along the old way, and she said there were moments where I just stepped over a stile, and it was, for some reason, it was that particular moment that she had this big release and revelation. So I think the reason for these monuments and these different things is to create the structure of the journey, and then within that you're then free to discover things.
There is an irony here, John, you probably know this, is that, and you talked about the dragon at the beginning. I can remember a PhD student of mine did a big study of a Portuguese city, and all around the edges of the city was a dragon with a dragon. There's dragon statues in one form or another, and somebody fighting or killing the dragon. There's lots of stories. It's not just our blessed patron saint who did this. Because the countryside, the nature in a civilized society, the world of civilization, nature was dangerous. It was a place of demons. It is the pagus in which dwell the pagani, the pagans. And one of the things about pilgrimage, about people moving through these, is that they actually, through their movement, through their iteration of the spaces, whether as collectives or as individual eremitic peoples, what they are doing is making that terrifying space Christian, sacred, holy, spiritual, so that somebody like Wordsworth can go out and be astounded by the daffodils and have those moments when they see God, or what they might be frightened to call God.
And it does it despite ourselves. So I remember talking to one of the priests at Lourdes in France, who, so Lourdes, very working class shrine. Bernadette Soubirous was an uneducated girl who saw visions of the Virgin Mary. And if you've ever been to Lourdes, it's a bit like a Disneyland for Catholics. It's amazing. I love it. It's great. I love a kind of statue and, you know, t-shirts with Virgin Mary on. And, you know, I've got a brilliant hologram that changes Jesus on the cross. He's dead, he's alive, dead is it's amazing, right? So you can collect all that stuff. But then when you actually get into the shrine itself, you know, it's a really holy place. But, you know, the story is that this young girl saw these visions of the Virgin Mary, and so I pulled the priest to one side and I went, "What do you reckon then? Do you reckon it's true?" And it was like, he went, "What do you mean?" And I went, "Well, do you believe this? Do you believe that there was a girl who saw a vision?" And he kind of went, "Well, it doesn't really matter, does it?" No. And I went, "Wow, of course it doesn't." You know, and he said, you know, he'd been born and raised in that area, and he was very cynical about the whole thing. You know, he was very cynical about the gift shops. He was very cynical about the money-making aspect of it. But he said, despite all his cynicism, every single day, people come and experience something in that space that they cannot articulate, that is not tangible, that is something beyond the holograms of Jesus and the glow-in-the-dark statues of the Virgin Mary. You know, and so pilgrimage does its thing despite our cynicism.
Yeah, it's I mean, metaphor. I think we're in the realm of metaphor, and sometimes when people say, you know, is that true? I think I say, well, like, it's true and it isn't true. It doesn't, on the factual level, fine. It might not be true. It might be true. That's a debate.
That's why it's called faith and not sure.
But there has to be something. There has to be something about, like, the real, the psychological, the human truth within a story. So Lord of the Rings, for example, Middle Earth, is it true? Well, it's yes, because people know what you mean roughly when you talk about it. So there's a truth to it, and the stuff that happens within it, the story, that there is a truth, otherwise it wouldn't resonate at all with us. And I think it's getting into that realm where you start to see connections, and you start to talk in metaphors, and you start to become poetic, because then you're starting to weave with the sort of truth and reality and whatever, and then you find a better one. I think it's the finding a better
There's
reality.
There's also the contrast
truth.
on pilgrimage of the poetic and the very not poetic. Because I think sometimes what we do when we talk about pilgrimage, and you chat to people who've done the Camino, but they're very sort of, you know, articulate and poetic. It's really hard work.
Yeah.
It's really hard work walking that far. And, you know, putting one foot in front of the other. When you sang about the blisters earlier, you know, it's proper graft. You know, I had a moment on the Camino where we were staying in hostels along the way. Karen, I did it for telly. I presumed there would be a minibus we got on. That's what I presumed, right? In my naivety, I thought we'd do like half a mile and then they'd put us on a bus and drive us. Oh no, we had to do the thing. I was with Debbie McGee on my pilgrimage, the lovely Debbie McGee.
We actually did the pilgrimage together.
We did it together. It was a strange experience. And there was a moment where we got to one of these hostels, there was one bed left. And I looked at Debbie McGee, she looked at me, and I said, well, you're getting a worse deal on this one than I am, because my bottom is 5 times your size, that we're going to have to share a bed together. And I remember rinsing out my knickers in the sink, because I had 2 pairs of knickers for 4 weeks or whatever it was. So it's not a glamorous thing. We talk about this amazing spiritual experience that we had, which I did on all the pilgrimages I've been on, but also it's proper graft, it's hard work. And there's something about that contrast, which means that the spiritual feels even brighter and shinier.
Yeah. It's so glad. I'm so glad you're going into this, because I think, like, it is the best thing about it is the grounding. You know, feet on the earth, head in the stars. You know that.
I'm not sure Debbie McGee thought that when she was rinsing a gusset.
No, but it's just there is something so humbling and grounding about pilgrimage, and it can be glamorous in a way once you tell the stories afterwards, but at the time it can be quite tricky. And actually, these shoes I'm wearing are the first grounding shoes I've ever worn, where the soles are electrically conductive. And so my electrical body is connected with the electrical earth. And so we're taking this idea of grounding. Yeah, I know, you just touch me and you'll be fine. Earth-wired to the ground. And I just think, the more I go into this, the body is such an important part of pilgrimage. And by connecting with the body and by pushing it to its limit, you release into this other world of magic and
maybe
metaphor.
this is a good point to introduce the kind of the 21st century goggles, i.e. we look at pilgrimage often from that very rational 21st century perspective, but everything you're talking about is as much about feeling as it is about thinking. It's kind of, say, visceral, it's about emotion, it's about feeling the spirit of a place. Would you kind of agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the last few hundred years we've been in a kind of age of knowledge and knowledge acquisition in a scientific revolution, and we've been desperate to sort of really anchor down our knowledge and really do proper empirical research so we know stuff for fact. And I think we're shifting now. I think there's a shift. People want more experience. And I think you're seeing this when you go to heritage places, places of monuments, that there's more of a desire from the punter or the person, the pilgrim, to connect with the place on an emotional level, not just a factual level. The interpretation boards just absorbing facts around a place. It feels a little bit kind of 30 years ago. Not that it's a bad thing, it's a great thing. You have to have that to tell the story, to make it come alive. But actually, if you can go beyond that and actually start to feel these places, I think we want to drop into our hearts more than we used to.
I think one of the things is that my experience of it, because I'm a little bit older than you, is that spirit was always there. That in a way, I certainly felt this, is that in that moment of silence, of rationality, that you talked about, I bought up a Catholic, I bought into the rationality, lost my faith. But always there was a sense of spirit, there was a sense of somehow or other, something that lay beyond us. And I think people became ashamed, frightened to talk of spirituality, because it did not seem logical, it did not seem right in this material world. But one of the things that we certainly learned, and a lot of us have written about recently, is in fact the past in a way doesn't exist. I think this is the sort of thing that you're alluding to. Every present remakes its past, and it makes it sound like 1984, but it is the hard, there is, I was going to say the hard truth, but there is in that thinking no such thing as truth. There is simply the remaking of the world, whether it's Hawksmoor with an extraordinary piece of architecture. We're all in the business of remaking our worlds and reshaping our pasts, whether it's anecdote or a story, something we tell to people as we journey along the way. We reshape those. I don't think I've ever told an anecdote or a story in exactly the same way twice. Listen to a musician who is, in a sense, doing proper folk music. Okay. That song is never the same again. That's why you look at Cecil Sharp and you look at these great folk songs, some of which are full of spirit. And there are about 1,000 versions of each song. And I think that is part of the essence of pilgrimage, is that it offers this opportunity. Talked about the collective of the pilgrimage, talked about Chaucer, extraordinary people, all of them extraordinary people, and then remaking themselves and remaking their paths in these stories that they were then telling each other. And I think that in a way we've moved into a world now, this postmodern world, if you like, this post-materialist world, where we're freer to talk about these things. I couldn't believe, my younger self could never believe that I would be sitting here talking about the spirit with this connection with a material past. I'm very fond of saying that these places, you go to places, they don't speak. It's the people who speak about the places, the people who tell the stories, the narratives. I'm an archaeologist. There's no truth in the things that I dig up. There is truth in the interpretations that we place upon them?
I think they speak, they just don't speak in English.
Well, they're in Elvish.
Yeah. So, and actually, it's really interesting you bring up Cecil Sharp, because in preparation for this, I went to Cecil Sharp Library yesterday to try and find a song about St George. And it's really hard to find a song about St George, it turns out. And she said, well, you know, the words are here, so why don't you just make up a melody? I mean, that's what they would have done.
Exactly.
And I think that instance of the self-autonomy, the autonomy that the pilgrim has in the crafting of their journey. Every pilgrim can make their own journey in their own way. They are the authors of their own journey. And I think that's one of the big appeals of it, is that you're not being told what to do. You don't have to sit up, stand down in a church service, or whatever. You find your own path, and you own it. You own your own transformation.
So from my perspective, as someone who's kind of in the conservation business, the interesting thing about what you've all said is when we engage in interpretation of sites, of heritage sites, whether it's Angkor Wat or wherever it might be, but in the context of pilgrimage, it's how you allow space for those stories, that freedom to actually emerge, and that inspiration. I think
it's curated encounter, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so you do need the information boards, you do need all that sort of stuff in buildings, but you also just need to allow the building to do what the building does. And I think one of the reasons why people might have been reluctant to talk about spirituality in a sort of, in the past might have been because we're so worried about getting the lyrics right, so worried about getting every single word of it right, rather than just thinking, oh, there's the tune, I can sort of join in with what's happening here.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a familiar tune, but I don't know all the words yet.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we do that thing of presuming that we need to know every single bit of the lyrics before we can join in the song.
I think there's also something else that I think, as we sing together in a church, there's this business of the collective. We're sharing, not just stories, but we're sharing identity. And identity is very, very powerful in all of this. It's a coming together of people collectively to do something that they can each and every one of them identify with. Now that's just a hook for me to hang this on.
This is so cool.
This is the front of an ampulla, a lead ampulla, carrying holy water from Santiago de Compostela, that we excavated in the gatehouse. It's in the form of a scallop shell. You probably recognise this. And found in the gatehouse of Strata excavating. It's 14th century. You look at the medieval illustrations, the paintings and the drawings of the pilgrim, they're all wearing badges. They all identified themselves with each other. And in fact, kings wrote laws protecting the pilgrims, provided that they wore the badges and the kit. And that's why they all carry the scrip. Our pilgrim statue at Strata Florida carries a satchel on the side. That in the cap badge. And when they finished the pilgrim, I always wondered, I thought some poor pilgrim has lost his pilgrim badge at Strata Florida, and I felt sorry for him or her. But in fact, actually, when the pilgrims had completed, they brought their badges back to their parish churches or to their favourite churches, and they were deposited in rows, hammered into beams, as testament to the fact that they had collectively been on the pilgrim, and it was, go yourself, do this thing yourself.
And pilgrims today on the Santiago de Compostela still take those shelters, still take people with them. So when my friends of faith found out that I was going to do that people gave me things to take with me. Will you take me with you? And so on the inside of my scallop shell that I took with me, I wrote the names of all the people that had asked me to take them with me on my journey. So it's a real connection with the story of pilgrimage.
I want to make sure we get an opportunity for the audience to ask a few questions, so I'll leave you with just one quick answer from each of you, which is looking to the future, and that is, if you were looking to identify a future site of pilgrimage, what might that be? What might that look like? Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
The one I've been thinking about, in fact we were talking about it just before we came in, it's not there anymore, but I'm thinking about pilgrimage sites that are to do with popular culture, with things like films and football. The stairs from the Exorcist movie are a massive place of pilgrimage for people. And in the basement of Harrods, when Fayed owned it, I don't know if you ever saw the statue of Dodi and Diana entwined, and in the glass case below was the last glass that Diana had drank out of, and it still had her lipstick mark on the rim of the glass. It's not there anymore, but I remember standing there and watching people come into this place of pilgrimage. Elvis's pyjamas in the Hard Rock Cafe, that sort of thing. So I don't know what it'll be, but I suspect it'll be something, probably where Gemma Collins fell over on the ice on Dancing on Ice. None of you probably watched that, but there we go.
Okay, well, obviously I'm in the business of trying to promote pilgrimages, so I'm thinking ways of scaling it up. And the best answer I've got for this is to turn Glastonbury Festival into a pilgrimage destination, so that all of the festival goers, as pilgrims would have done in the past, because pilgrims, it's not just about place, it's about time.
Yeah.
Arriving at the right time in the right place means you meet all the people at once. And so old pilgrims of old would have arrived at festival moments, May Day, Lammas, summer solstice, those kinds of times. They would have arrived at those times, and then they would all had a big party. So walking from Wells Cathedral or Glastonbury town, if they were able to make it work and have as many festival goers as we want to arrive that way rather than by car, you can have hundreds of thousands of new pilgrims.
Excellent. David, yours.
So it'll be journey first.
Yeah, I guess
lost on the ground.
Well, interestingly, the pyramid stage is built on the point where two ley lines cross. Jean Michel decided that was where it was going to be. So in a way, it has a very
resonance.
An earthly resonance. Yeah.
I actually nearly went to the first Glastonbury Festival. I am that old. But I was actually excavating in Glastonbury, not on the cathedral site, but on a mound. And we found a body. And rather stupidly, I said out loud to somebody, "Oh, it must be King Arthur." Next thing, it was in the local newspaper. And literally hundreds of people invaded the site. Show us Arthur. Show us Arthur. You can almost make anywhere a pilgrimage location if you've got the right story. That's too cynical. My answer to your question, John, absolutely has to be Strata, Florida. On that note, hang on a minute. That is why we put the pilgrim as a statue on top of the hill. And I want to thank the World Monument Fund and one of its trustees, who is here, I hope, this evening, very much for helping us with the community erect that pilgrim on a hill. And in September, we're having a walks festival. This is the advert point. We're having a walks festival, which is part of this promotion of Strata, Florida. So, I will try and persuade Worthy Farm to move to Strata, Florida, and we will have our pilgrimage and rock and roll.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Strata, Florida is an amazing place. Do go to it. And right next to it is the source of the River Tavy, Llyn Tavy, the big lake, and it's got this amazing connection to agriculture and to the water and stuff. It's an amazing place, and
you can actually drink the water. And I say that in London.
Incredible, yeah.
I think on that note, with a very fine advert for Strata, Florida, perhaps we've got time for just two questions. Is there anyone who's got a burning question they wish to ask? Someone with a hand up. There's a microphone coming to you.
Can I ask the panel what their view is about relics in the 21st century? Pilgrimages tend to revolve around the route, but at some point there is focus on the relic. I don't mean it in an Anglo-Catholic point of view, I just mean the importance of the relic and maybe the notion of trust, which is what you mentioned earlier about being somewhere which is special, but is it special?
In a sense, an archaeological answer to that question is essentially they are artifacts. We dig up bodies all the time in archaeology. And I think it's a clear example. It's what coheres around it. What's the story in relationship to that? And as your priest at Lourdes was saying, if you believe, so it is. And for me, as an archaeological materialist in my younger days, I found that very difficult. I poo-pooed relics. There are thousands of St. Peter's if you put him all back together again, as John's pointed earlier as we were talking. But I come to believe in them because they are this link. They are this link with the actions of not just great people who are commemorated in the relics, but from everybody that goes there and believes in them.
I love the materiality of relics. I think we need a focus just in the way that when you got out that ampulla and you said, everyone, that people, there's something, it anchors it and it takes you into imagination. And I think anything in this world where we can be brought into more imagination is better. And actually I learned something last week, that hocus pocus comes from the phrase hoc est corpus, meaning this is the body. And so basically, you say this is the body, and it is. And I like that. I like that way of being that we have, that ability to be playful to the extent we can heal ourselves. And I think I like that part of our relics. And you can watch all about this on Netflix's Mysteries of the Faith. There's a whole series about all relics around the world.
Kate, last word to you.
I adore relics. I'm a huge fan. So I'm first generation female literacy in my family, and I also used to be a teacher. So anything that you can have in your toolbox that allows to be a representation as a means to teach people things is important. So the stained glass windows around a church, the physical objects, when perhaps language, reading and writing is not the thing, anything else you can add to that wonderful treasure trove of being able to teach people about faith is a good thing for me. The bones of St. Teresa of Lisieux travelled around the country not so long ago, and the queues were round the block to go and see this. You're not even seeing the bones. It's not even like some sort of like macabre, sort of dark tourism, let's go and see a leg bone. It doesn't you just see the box that the relics are in. But the queues around the block, and not everybody in that queue believed that those were the bones of St. Teresa of Lisieux, but yet there they were. And so these objects have a power to draw people as a signpost to conversations about other things of the faith. That's what they're for. But also I really like the withered hand in Wigan that's in a cupboard. That's an amazing thing.
So I'm going to end it there because I'm conscious of the time. We've had a really wide-ranging conversation, and my thanks to Kate, Guy, and David for that, because we went everywhere in terms of pilgrimage. We did, just like a pilgrimage. So thank you all very much, and perhaps you could join your hands in applause.